Hi folks, we're going to get started on lesson 5, which is going to go through an analysis of markets and positioning.
All right, so here we go. We are analysis of markets and positioning. We're going to start out by talking about market segmentation. So to start, what is a segment? Well, a segment is a group of people who have needs for products and have the ability, willingness, and authority to purchase the product. Now, a segment is a particular set of people that have similar needs for these products. So they have a very similar desire for the way the product is going to look and feel and ultimately how it should behave. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about market segmentation. Market segmentation, the important thing to know about this is a group of people who have needs for products and have the ability, willingness, and authority to purchase the product. Now, one of the most important things with that is the group of people have similar needs, right? And they have similar desires for what they want to see in the product, right? And how the product behaves. So it's easier to target a whole group of customers and label it as a certain segment than it would be to go after, say, just everybody. So what you do is you start by developing your marketing mix. And when you hear marketing mix, I want you to associate that with product, price, promotion, and distribution. That's what the marketing mix is all about. We're going to actually come back to this slide, but this illustrates it right here. So product, price, promotion, distribution, that all together make up the product mix, or marketing mix. And we're going to go explain each one of these one at a time. Okay, the key success factors are what you would need to do to target a particular segment. And if you hit those key success factors effectively, then you are going to be doing quite well with your product, right? And the thing is that each segment is going to require its own separate marketing mix. So here's showing you what's going on, right? These are 3 different segments of the market. This firm is going to go after all 3. For each one of those segments, they would need to have a different marketing mix.
But those marketing mixes change over time.
Look how the customer buying criteria has changed for the fashion industry, right? Look at how jeans have changed, where it was 70s, the customer buying criteria was bell bottoms, right? And then it got into really baggy jeans, right, in the early 90s. And then it got to be extremely skinny jeans, right? Very, very tight jeans, which is still popular with some out there. Some of you probably watching it's probably still popular, right? The fashion industry has changed quite a bit from 30 years to today. It's just an example of how, even though they're in different segments, the segments might be the same. You always have the preppy segment. You always have the hipstery or indie customer segment, right? And then you have middle-aged segment, whatever it would be for the fashion industry. The segments are all the same year to year. It's just that the criteria changes for what they want. So the firm needs to have flexibility to change and to meet the criteria as it evolves. How does a company figure out what that criteria is? The best way to figure it out is to develop a long-lasting relationship with the customer. And that's how it will determine what that criteria is going to be and how those changes are going to occur, so that way you can best keep up with them. We're now going to talk a little bit about the marketing mix. First, I'm going to show you a little matrix here that plots out market potential against R&D investment. So let's say the market potential is low. That means that there is not much demand for the product potentially. At high market potential, there is a lot of demand, right? Do you ever want to spend a lot of R&D investment where there's not very much market? No, you don't, right? And really, the only time you want to spend a lot for an R&D investment is where there is high market potential. There's a lot of market potential, then you're in good shape. Now let's say just a medium amount of R&D investment and the market potential, it's okay, right? It's all right, right? Well, you would want to take that and reposition your products, right? And make it so you are really reducing your R&D investment over time, right? But really what you want to do is trying to get that into here. This is kind of the sweet spot to be in, where there's high market potential. The ideal situation to be in here is where you don't have to spend a lot, your R&D investment is low, but the market potential is high. That's the best spot to be in because it doesn't require you to spend as much money, but you got to reap all the benefits, right? If it's still a high market potential and you got to spend a lot of money, what you do is you just come up with new products, right? That's the best thing to do. If you don't have to spend a lot of R&D, you get away with just taking an existing product, reposition it, slapping some new paint on it, and customers going to buy it, right? Because they don't demand a lot of R&D investment. Moving on, talk a little about the first element of the marketing mix, price. This one is really important because this is the only element of that entire marketing mix where you're actually going to be able to generate revenue, right? So price is critical, right? It's something that's flexible, right? Changes are going to impact your margin. So if the price goes up and your costs stay the same, if you're able to charge a higher price, you're in great shape. Your margin actually increases, right? If you go on Amazon, you will see that there are many different prices for things. So there's a website now you can go to where you can actually enter a product that you want to buy on Amazon, and it will track it for you, and it will tell you the very best, where it's the best price to do it. In fact, it's called, not advertising for it, but Camel, Camel, Camel. Let's move on to promotion. Right? This is the relationship, right, between the promotion that you're doing, the firm, and the market segment, right? And it includes everything that's going on right here. So you need to do this on a segment-by-segment basis. So again, different segments are going to have different promotion values that you're going to do there. And what this is showing you right here is a direction, right? Is the firm essentially providing something to the market, or is the market driving what the firm does, right? So does the firm drive the seller, well, the buyers? Well, advertising, you're trying to do that, trying to go directly to the market segment. So it goes from the firm to the market segment, right? But personal selling goes from either way, right? You go firm to the market segment or the market segment back to the firm, right? Sales promotion goes from the firm to the market segment. Public relations goes from the firm to the market segment. But publicity, right? This is where consumers could potentially raise a great amount of awareness for your product, or potentially ruin your product if you're doing any controversial stuff. That goes from the segment back to the firm. So that's promotion. Let's move on and talk about distribution. It's going to include a few different things like what you see here. It's going to include your order processing, right? It's going to inventory management, your materials handling, includes any cost for the warehouse itself, so warehousing, and transportation. So let's talk a little bit more about forecasting, right? So here's what this says. These are techniques that yield the same general quantitative result, right? And ideally, what you want to do is engage in you're going to engage in one of the techniques we're about to talk about here, and you find at the end of the day that it gives you the same result as one of the other sales forecasting techniques. You have a problem if the sales forecasting technique you're using gives you an entirely different number. That means that something is off in the math, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But really what that means is that it's probably not valid, right? So what you do is you use one technique to validate another one. And then at the end of the day, there's no substitute for actual revenue and cost data. You need to have that at a minimum in order to use any of these sales forecasting techniques. So let's talk about them. There's quite a few. We're going to go through these. We'll talk about each one. I do want you to know all of the sales forecasting techniques. There are 8 of them. I want you to know all 8. We'll start with executive judgment. So here's some positive things about it. It's expedient, right? It's also inexpensive. At the end of the day, though, it's not scientific, and it could be influenced by others' judgment. What executive judgment is, it's sort of like trusting your gut, right? This only really works when the product demand is stable and the management team has lots of industry experience, right? The problem, too, is that you don't really know what customers' opinions are if you are only using executive judgment, right? So it's potentially a problem. And so again, when do you use it? When demand is stable, and also when products are in the maturity stage of development. Naive. This makes a lot of sense when you are in the maturity stage as well. Right? So, and the reason it's during maturity stage, the entry of firms from outside the industry is pretty minimal, because really what happens is all the different segments have already been addressed, right? You've already served all those different segments, right? So the book talks about the tobacco industry as an example of this one, right? So here are some positive attributes, the same ones, right? Expedient, inexpensive. On the downside, doesn't consider future expectations, and you put a lot of focus on how much demand there was from last year. So when do you use it? When growth rates are stable and when market shares are stable. All right, exponential smoothing. This is where you're using multiple years of sales data and you're trying to forecast future sales from that data. Right? You're projecting the next period's sales by using the average of past year's sales and the most recent sales, but what you're doing is you're putting a lot more of an emphasis on the more recent sales. Right? So this is going to address the sales patterns over several years. It's also more sophisticated than executive judgment or the naive technique. On the downside, though, you don't have an adjustment for seasonality. What that means is it's a problem you might not notice. Let's say that the reason the movies are doing so well is because it's raining, right? It's a wet season. There's not much to do outside. So the movies are going to do really well. If you didn't make an adjustment for seasonality, you're not going to know that. Right, so you got to be careful. We'll talk a little bit about seasonality again in just a little bit. Also, you're assuming more recent years are a better predictor of future sales, but there could be some systematic reason why more recent years are essentially off, right? Why it's not a really good figure to use, right? What you do there, what you're talking about there, is some type of a contamination, right, in your data. What could happen, for example, is there's a recession. A recession is hopefully not permanent, it's temporary. That's going to affect your sales. So if you're basing on a recession, potentially you will not be producing enough. Now, on the other hand, if it was a boom period, right, and you're basing your sales forecast on the boom, you might potentially be producing too much and find that you have more products than you can sell. So with application, when you want to use this, for annual sales forecasts, right? If you have that, that's really where you want to look at. Okay, the Delphi technique. This one is becoming more and more important for predicting sales, and lots of larger companies are using this one. What you're using for Delphi is experts. You're using expert opinions, and really this is common where experts are working remotely. They're connected maybe through the internet. Well, the way you do it is use a questionnaire in stage one, and then you summarize those results. Then you use that exact same questionnaire and you give them back to your respondents, and they fill that out. Then you give them another questionnaire, you give them the results from the previous round. So what you're doing is you constantly give the respondents new questionnaires, but you attach the results of the previous round. Now, is it possible that when you're doing that, you're essentially going to brainwash your respondents to just go with whatever the status quo is and get into a groupthink mentality? That's possible, so you got to be careful with that. All right, so based on an expert panel, it's iterative. On the negative side, it's very time-consuming to go through all these different rounds, and you got to find experts. Right, if you're just using laymen who don't really know what you're talking about, it's a problem. It's very popular for international sales forecasting. Next one is time series analysis. Right, this is where you look for patterns. Right, in a time series, you're looking for a pattern. What you're doing is you're assuming that past patterns continue into the future. I will tell you guys that on the research end, we use time series regressions to see what the effects of one event could be. In your statistics classes, you might have heard this referred to as a longitudinal type of analysis, where you look at the same subject at multiple times, right? So you might look at it in sort of like a pre-case, and then pre-treatment, and then post-treatment, right? And see what kind of changes there might be. Right, but back to businesses, what you're looking for is patterns. If you can find a pattern, you can forecast sales. You are assuming that any past patterns are going to continue into the future. Right, you can do trend, cycle, seasonal, and random factor analysis, this one. And the seasonal analysis is useful because it helps you determine if sales follow the pattern in a given year. Right, so looking at how are snowplow sales doing? Well, you're going to see that snowplow sales are going to increase quite a bit in December, maybe not so much around us, but possibly up north, right? It's going to be really big in December. And nobody's buying snow plows in July, right? So it lets you see that stuff. Requires significant historical data. And when you want to use it, when you got products that have stable demand, that's one time to use it. Right? Demand's not really going to change much year to year. And also variability of sales are going to occur throughout the year. Right? So that means that every September, sales look a certain way. Every December, sales look a different way. Right? So this variability of sales are going to occur throughout the year, but comparing year to year, pretty stable. Okay, regression analysis is where you're trying to find a connection between an independent variable and a dependent variable. With this one, you might see simple regressions where you've only got one independent variable, or a multiple regression where you got more than one independent variable. This also lets you put controls in there. Controls allow you to put variables in that could, or that also will have an effect on your dependent variable, right? But it lets you put them in there so you can say, well, this is exactly the effect of your experimental variable, right, has on the outcome variable, right? So on the positive side, you get productive power based on multiple inputs, right? And you also get more of a mathematical precision. On the downside, you need historical data, a lot of significant amount of that. And it doesn't provide a causal relationship. So we don't know if X causes Y or Y causes X. We just know that X and Y are related, right? So it gets to an endogeneity problem. That's what you hear that referred to as endogeneity problem. Okay, and when you want to use this for annual sales forecasts, or excuse me, when you're going to use this is when for existing products where a precise relationship exists between one or more variables and sales itself. Okay, two more to talk about. We got scenario analysis. Right? Scenario generates a strategic alternative based on different assumptions about the future. Provides a range of forecasts. You can plan for several different contingencies. And the downside, the results are based entirely upon the accuracy of the assumptions that you make. Right? So when you use it, we'll inflect some estimates where future is not well known, or products where demand varies significantly on a year-to-year basis. And the last one we got is market test methods. Right, so what this on the positive side is you get actual revenue and cost data from numerous sites, and the results of those sites can be fully analyzed before you actually commercialize that information. On the negative side, it's very time consuming, it's expensive, and you give some type of a hint to the competition about what you're doing, give them a signal. So when you use it for new product sales, well, that's not as much of an issue. Or introducing an established product in a new market, right, somewhere it hasn't been before. And that's where that stuff doesn't really matter quite as much about the something to be concerned about.
And that's going to do it for today. Thank you all very much.